Hi, my name is Keith Nitka. I'm the Battleship Operations Manager, and I want to thank you for joining us again on this Whiskey Wednesday virtual adventure. As you know, if you've been watching, I like to do things a little behind the scenes, stuff that you don't normally get to see when you visit Battleship Wisconsin. And when I have the opportunity, I like to involve former shipmates to get the inside scoop, so to speak. So today I have with me Brendan Holmes. Brendan and I were shipmates together on board Battleship Wisconsin during Desert Shield and Desert Storm. Brendan is an operations specialist. He was second class when he was on board. And today we're in Combat Engagement Center, or Strike. Brendan worked in this area, specifically at that console, and he worked the Tomahawk missiles. But I'm going to let him tell you all about that. To give you a little background on what Combat Engagement Center is, it is a room that is only found on board the 4 Iowa-class battleships. There is in the Navy the room Combat Information Center, the CIC. That's on all Navy ships. We have one here as well on board Battleship Wisconsin, but ours is inside the armored box down on the 4th deck. So it's well inside, protected inside the skin of the ship, inside the armored box. When the battleships were recommissioned in the 1980s for President Ronald Reagan's 600-ship fleet, we needed to update battleships, Wisconsin specifically, with a Harpoon and Tomahawk missile systems. There was no way that we could put all the electronics and all the electronic warfare that was needed for the update into CIC inside the armored box, so they created a different space. We're on the O2 level, which is the second floor up from the main deck on board Battleship Wisconsin. This space was actually built to house the Admiral and the Admiral's staff, and in the 1980s, admirals didn't go to the fleet the way they did in the 1940s and 50s with an entourage of people, so they didn't need this big space. This space lent itself perfectly to what we needed to do on board Battleship Wisconsin and the other battleships as far as Combat Engagement Center, or CEC. So that's the background of the room here that we're in. This is Mr. Brendan Holmes, and I'm going to let him tell you about what he did here in Strike and a few things about how it all works in here. So Brendan, thank you very much for joining us today on this virtual adventure. It's really good to see you again.
As
brother.
well. Thank you for
much.
having us. This is very surreal coming back here, 30 years later.
Sure.
Being a former sailor and being on this beautiful ship, and then coming back 30 years later, and everything just coming rushing back to you.
Yes.
Immediately you're like, oh, this is we called it strike, but it's just you're immediately like, go up this ladder, go this door, this is where I slept, So it's it's a great experience, and then knowing all the people we worked with, like EWs right here, OSs right there, the captain, oh my gosh, the area, everything. Yeah, the memories are fantastic, beautiful ship, the best in the Navy.
Thank you. Thank you
Of course,
very much.
you guys are doing a great job. Yeah, so I came on the Wisconsin in October of '89.
Okay.
Transferred from Newport, Rhode Island. I think I'm on board as a OSSN, an E3, and became a second class on the Wisconsin. And we deployed to Desert Shield, as you had mentioned, in Desert Storm. At the time, I was just the operations specialist, and we had a gentleman who was retiring by the name of Leo Kenworthy. He had done 20 years in Mr. Tomahawk, was his nickname, and I believe he retired in December of 1990. And they needed someone to transfer from being an OS to work what's called Tomahawk Weapons Control System when we were FOTC, FOTC. That is the Force Over the Horizon Target Coordinator.
Okay.
So that's what we were during Desert Storm. So I trained under 2 other OSs, kind of on the job, during Desert Shield. So when Leo left, as I said, I think it was December of '90, I then filled his position. The benefit of working this station versus being an OS is we had 3 duty station versus port and starboard.
Okay.
Which you'd be aware of, port and starboard 12 on, 12 off. So we had 8-hour work days, which were great. So that was the best part about working in this. So fast forward, December Yeah, so Leo retires January. We're in Desert Shield, converts to Desert Storm January the 17th.
Yes.
So what I always like to tell people when being here is the time difference. So 1:40 a.m. local in the theater, 5:40 here.
Yes.
In the Eastern. So the night before, so people believe Desert Storm started on January the 16th.
Yes.
When it actually started on January the 17th. Went to general quarters. And just prior to that, about 4 in the afternoon, I remember sitting at this console. I think my shift ended at 4:45. And really cool story. 2 gentlemen come up behind me. And I'm working the console. And one of the gentlemen taps me on the back. And he says, Petty Officer Holmes, what's your clearance? So I had a secret no foreign, NOFORN, which is no foreign dissemination of classified documents. And he looks at whomever it was. They were probably maybe NSA, or high-ranking government officials. And they said, okay, you now have a top secret clearance. So I'm probably the only guy in the Navy that didn't get a background check for a top secret clearance. And he hands me a paper, and he says, I want you to type this message verbatim. So I'm typing away. It takes about 5-10 minutes. And he said, you're going to send that message Zulu, which is flash traffic.
Okay.
So when we sent that message, all other communications ceased, and this message went out. So it superseded absolutely everything. I like to refer to this station as, in today's language, be like a router.
Okay.
So information flowed in through this center, everything in theater, and then we disseminated it back to the fleet. So kind of like a FedEx. If you can imagine, everything goes to one location, and then everything goes back out.
Okay.
So, so I get done typing the message. My top secret clearance was revoked. So I had my Andy Warhol 15 minutes of fame, and I typed the Indigo message.
All right.
So a lot of people don't know what the Indigo message is. Basically, it's where and when Desert Storm would start.
Okay.
So as I'm typing it, I'm engaging with the people behind me, and I said, is this the Indigo message? And they were like, yeah, where'd you learn that? I said, I learned that in A school. So the Indigo message is what you send up to 24 hours before hostility.
All right.
So I knew, and then I was sworn to secrecy I couldn't say,
Yeah, sure.
it wasn't like, hey, this guy wrote the Indigo message. It was, So when we went to general quarters, battle stations, as the public knows it, about midnight technically on the 17th of January, everyone went to battle stations. I was not on this console because, as the gentleman escapes me, who was on this station when we actually fired
his GQ station.
Yes, general quarter station.
Your battle station or GQ station was what?
Well, it was here.
Okay.
But if one of the 3 people, so I wasn't assigned to that particular. I wasn't on the midnight to 7 watch.
Oh, all right.
So that was his normal watch. I actually worked over there on the DRT, which is a Dead Reckoning Tracer. And so, as I said, if any other station, like had I been on the midnight to 7 watch, I would have been here, when the missiles were first launched. So we worked. So these 2 boxes up here would hold really cool satellite communications. Now, I like to entertain the public because I worked, when I got out of the service, I started working selling computers. And I tell people, so one of these was Otsisics and the other was Tatix.
Okay.
So they were, I forget the acronyms, but so they would download information at 600 baud. So, imagine baud bits.
All right.
600 bits. Now we're at like downloading gigabits, billions of bits of information. So, but at the time, that was the latest. Figure 1990. So we would download information from several bases: Johns Hopkins University, MacDill Air Force Base, and somewhere else. So the Tomahawk missile there's 4 variants of the Tomahawk cruise missile. AB, Alpha Bravo Delta Charlie, Charlie Delta. Now, I don't remember the exact breakdown. One of them was an anti-ship missile.
Yes, that's the one that we did not carry.
Yep. One was land attack.
Mm-hmm.
One was nuclear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Delta, if I'm not mistaken, was a sub-munition packet.
Yes, that carried the bomb.
Yep. So the bomblets would go, and the coolest thing about that is it wasn't a fast-moving missile. It moved just around Mach 1, which is about 550 miles an hour at sea level. That's important. A lot of people don't understand it's at sea level when they measure Mach speed. So it would go to an airstrip, and it would drop off bomblets. So it would destroy the runway, and then the missile would then continue on and take out the control tower. So that was the great variant of that D. So I'm not certain the inventory. I know we had 32 Tomahawks on board. I'm not certain what we carried, and if I remember correctly, it was on the need-to-know basis.
Yeah.
And we used to have a saying in the service. It was, we can neither confirm nor deny the existence or non-existence of nuclear weapons on this vessel or any vessel in the Navy at this time or any time. I think.
Yeah,
that's 30 years ago.
That's pretty much it.
I think that's, because you remember everything, when you're in. So as I said, at this station, we weren't fire controlled. Fire controlmen sat down there. So there was 3 fire controlmen. The most senior would be the watch supervisor, and then Lieutenant Rosenblatt, Mike Rosenblatt, was the weapons officer for the Tomahawks. Mm-hmm. So he would be standing behind them, communicating with them. Captain David S. Bill would be in the chair, and so he was obviously a captain promoted to Rear Admiral, lower half, so 07 during Desert Storm. So he would communicate with him and the TAO, which was a Tactical Actions Officer. Mm-hmm. My job, as I had stated earlier, was to receive information. Basically, what would happen is it would have a theater, so it would not a movie theater, in theater, because I'm explaining to the public. Mm-hmm. So we would have the outline of the Persian Gulf, and then depending on where the ships were and the information that they would relay to us, we used at the time. Now this is when Aegis was in its infancy. Mm-hmm. The Aegis cruisers. Yes. We used NTDS, which is Navy Tactical Data System. So we relayed information that way. So the information, as I said, would flow into this particular console, and then we would disseminate to who we thought pertinent information should go to.
Sure.
So traffic.
Yeah.
The basic communication traffic. So our job was to make sure that the fire controlman, so you had an engagement planner, you had a release, and then you had, I remember the third guy. So basically, I would relay information to them, so they would know what to avoid.
Okay.
Yeah, so they would put in waypoints. So they're going to go 10 miles and turn left. So the missile itself, as I had stated earlier, used 2 different types of navigation. It may have improved, but this is, 1990. Yeah, so we're talking then. So Raytheon built these missiles. They had TERCOM and DESMAC.
Okay.
DESMAC is Digital Scene Mapping Area Correlation. TERCOM is Terrain Contour Matching. So terrain, as we know it, mountains, brooks, streams, roads, infrastructure. Okay. So it would know to avoid natural hazards. You don't want a missile, $1 million missile, flying into a mountain. It's not going to do any good. Then the DESMAC, which is a digital photography, that's what these were used for. We would download information from Johns Hopkins and McGill Air Force Base. Sure. They would upload it to a satellite. We would download it here. That information packet would go into the computer brain in the missile. Okay. So we weren't coordinating from here. We were just relaying information from those locations. So, as I said, we downloaded very slow, which was lightning speed at the time, because 3 years later, the public was allowed to use 1,200 baud modems in 1993, so you can imagine. So they would download, so you start your shift, you'd enter your passcode, we'd verify it, and they would download the information. It would sit in the system, and then the fire controlman, if I'm not mistaken, would then take that information and transfer it to the missile itself.
Okay.
So we were constantly doing it during Desert Shield.
Did it use latitudes and longitudes at any point in time?
Sort of, but because they had DESMAC, so the digital, so satellite photography, and it would say, okay, so we need to hit the command and control structures. We wanted to take out the ability for Iraq to communicate with its forces. So if the missiles are going to go into, so for argument's sake, we want to take out electrical producing, so we want to take out substations. One thing we would do is we'd send a missile in there, and it would knock that out. So if no electricity, people are in the blind, they can't communicate. So if we knew that generals were meeting at the 7th floor of the Sheraton in downtown Baghdad, we would send it into the 7th floor.
Okay.
That's so that DESMAC would literally send that missile in there. It wasn't a very large bomb. I believe it was like maybe 1,000-pound high explosive. I mean, that would obliterate this.
Yes.
But the idea is it didn't do a lot of collateral damage.
Right.
It was a pinpoint, a strategic strike. So we can knock out their ability to communicate with their troops.
Right.
And the troops, they're relaying on information like with even in companies today. You need management, you need communication flow. We need to be told what to do. Because if we're here in the middle of the Persian Gulf and we don't know that we have missiles coming at us, we're sitting ducks.
Right.
So we relayed on our sister ships to protect us.
Tell me about the waypoints.
Okay, perfect.
I know there are waypoints to get the missile from point A, us, to point B, the 7th floor of the Sheraton.
Absolutely.
So how does that all work?
So the engagement planner on the Tomahawk side would then put those waypoints in. So as I said, we would download them, then we would transfer it to them, and they'd say, okay, so when you go 3.6 miles, you're going to turn right, and everything is based on degrees, 360 degrees.
Sure.
So they may say, turn right at bearing, let's say 010, which is almost true north. So it would turn, and as I said, because it was a subsonic missile, it would turn, so the missile would come in over 500 miles an hour. It's fast. So we look at, wow, it's moving. But if it's standard missile, you just see it kind of coming in really slow and slowly turning. Now, when the missile's deployed, we had armored box launchers.
Yeah.
Now they're vertical launch systems. So the missile would launch. It's just a standard missile that would come out, then fins would deploy, and a turboprop fan would kick on. So the missile would make it like a jet.
Sure.
So I'm just going to fly in like this, so it's able to turn, not on a dime, but slowly meander through. We could have it following the river. Now the benefit of that, if it's between two mountains and it's following a river, radar can't pick it up.
Sure.
So it's going to fly low and slow, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, like you got 3 seconds when the missile comes up at the last second and hits a target. Wait, there's a missile coming, and you don't have time to react.
Right.
So that's the benefit of using that navigation system. Of course, the DESMAC would say, hey, you need to go to First and Main, where the Sheraton is on the 7th floor, 4th window from the left, and that's at the last minute. That would kick in.
Okay.
And say, this is where I'm going. So it wouldn't just, as I said, you'd have no collateral. Limited collateral. I want to clarify that. Limited collateral damage, but the idea was, we're going to get you. You're in a safe house. We're going to find you, and we're going to shoot that missile there.
Right. So the waypoints, you can have up to 10 of them. Is that right?
You know what? I'm a little fuzzy on that. I apologize for that one.
I understand, you could have up to 10 waypoints, and it's going from. So if your target is here, or if we're here and your target is here, it can go here and then here and then here and then here.
Absolutely.
And then hit that.
Exactly.
And the whole purpose behind that would be to confuse the enemy once they saw the.
Sure.
Like, oh my goodness, that's
at
an
the last
missile.
minute. Yeah, it's coming in.
Right.
So, and as I said, imagine it being like a fighter jet, because we had the ability, almost the equivalent of a kamikaze during World War II.
Sure.
You had a manned pilot, flying into these ships. That's what we'd have an unmanned plane flying directly, because we knew exactly, at the last minute we're going boom. That's what we're going to hit.
Okay. So one question that we get a lot in here when we bring guests in into the strike portion of the tour is the nuclear permission to fire
Okay.
key switches there.
Sure.
And most recently, we found
Wow.
the actual keys. I tried them out, and they do work.
Sure.
I turned them, but nothing happened, so I guess it's all disconnected.
Phew, no nukes.
No, but
I heard they can ruin your day.
I understand that, yes. Well, considering it's a dial yield from 5 to 150 kilotons, it's a pretty messy day.
Yeah.
But you did not work that here.
No.
As an OS. That was...
If that was the Tomahawks.
Okay.
So Lieutenant Rosenblatt, Mike Rosenblatt, would be in charge, the weapons release officer.
Mm-hmm.
So he would have senior enlisted, so you'd have E1 to E6, and then E7 to E9 are senior enlisted. The senior enlisted would then communicate with the weapons officer, or the weapons release officer, Lieutenant Mike Rosenblatt, and then he would communicate with the third in command on the ship, tactical actions officer, executive officer, and then commanding officer. At the time, David Bill was commanding officer.
Right.
So, so they would have to get authority from the commanding officer or the tactical actions officer. So they have varying levels. So if the commanding officer is not here, when they assume the watch, they'll say, "I am Commander Smith. I have the watch. I'm the tactical actions officer." They'd announce it so we all know who's in charge. Communications key.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then he would give them the release authorization. Obviously, it would be authenticated. So you'd have to go through clearance. You'd have, you'd communicate with whether it be the President of the United States or Congress or whomever is in charge at the time and say, you have authority to release nuclear weapons. So that would be over here. So as I said, my job was to avoid things and relay communications. Over there is where they would say, okay, Tomahawk.
They actually did the firing over there.
Yep. And then there are some videos you can watch them count down and release the weapons.
Okay.
And I believe it starts at 5 and counts down and kind of Rosenblatt back down. And he was a great officer.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah.
So we came back from Desert Storm. A little bit of information. We weren't the first to fire Tomahawks in this area. A lot of people believe, when you had stated earlier, that Reagan brought in a 600-ship Navy. They brought back the Iowa-class battleships. The news would hear. So obviously, all the footage from Desert Storm is from this ship.
Yeah.
So we were supposed to be the first, but unfortunately, the system reset itself.
Okay.
Had to do an Etch-a-Sketch, to shake it up and restart it. So So I'm not certain. I believe it was sub-launched from the Red Sea. It was the first Tomahawk missile, but for all intents and purposes,
it should have been us.
It should have been us, yeah. And then we had the news crew here, so great, an amazing crew.
Right.
I think when anybody speaks about the Wisconsin, it's just such pride to say that you were a Battleship Wisconsin sailor.
Yes.
I was on three commands, 2 other ships, and I actually didn't change my rocker. When I went on the other ship, I was there for 6 months, and I left the rocker for the Wisconsin. And weekly, I would be told, sailor, you gotta change your rocker. And I'm like, yeah, I'll get around to it.
Yeah.
Because being a Wisconsin sailor it was very memorable. The crew was great. And you know what? It was such a behemoth. That we didn't. We moved through the waves like this when we went through. Being on a frigate, you kind of get tossed around. So, what an experience! Anybody I speak with that is considering joining the Navy, or the military, I always say Navy's. Definitely join the Navy. That's definitely the best.
Absolutely.
It turned my life around. I ended up. I went to college 1 semester, then I joined the Navy, and I was floundering. I was like, what am I going to do? I ended up getting my PhD in Mandarin Chinese. Yep. So I studied that for 8 years postgraduate, and people would look at me saying, "Wait a second, you almost dropped out of high school," but I came to the Navy, and that really, yeah, I think I made E5 in 2 years and 2 months. Yeah. So I took off. It was a great experience. It enabled me to go to college. As I said, I completed my PhD work, and my wife, great kids. So it's it really teaches you to understand and respect a lot of things. So yeah, this is Keith. This has been wonderful coming back here and reminiscing about this. I'll tell you, this is kind of hard to hold the tears back. Because it's been a great experience. And as I said, when you first walk on, you're like, oh, wow, look at this. This was here, and then this is where Tom Steinberg sat. We used to call him Stinkbug, and Grabowski and Hurd and Captain. I mean, you look around and you it's almost like ghostly images.
Sure.
You see like
that's awesome.
Argov sat right there. Steckler right over there. Yeah. So it was. And hopefully they're watching. I called them out. I'm going to make sure that they're watching. Hey, I gave you a little cameo appearance there. So yeah, and you know what? If you'd like, I'd love to explain a little bit more about the ship because I was an OS as well.
Sure.
So if there's any other stations you want, by all means, I'd love to continue on the tour if it's okay with you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Of course,
we can
perfect.
do that.
Yep.
All right. So thank you again.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for joining us. Now I do want to, before we go, because we were talking about nuclear weapons, I want to preface the point that Battleship Wisconsin did not carry nuclear weapons during Desert Shield and Desert Storm. We followed the treaty between the United States and Russia at the time, and there were no nuclear weapons that traveled aboard Battleship Wisconsin going to the Persian Gulf. So when we were in the Persian Gulf, we only carried conventional warhead Tomahawk missiles. So I want to thank Brendan for being with us today and explaining about this station over here. And please join us on our next virtual adventure. Again, my name is Keith Nitka, and I'm the Battleship Operations Manager here at Battleship Wisconsin. Thank you very much.